You never forget the sound of a man calling your daughter a fat pig, especially on her wedding day. Those words didn't echo, they pierced. I stood in that narrow hallway, just outside the groom's dressing room, frozen with one hand on the doorknob. My breath caught somewhere between disbelief and fury. I could hear my pulse louder than the music drifting from the reception, a mix of laughter, clinking glasses, and shallow congratulations. Harrison's voice cut through it all, smug, cruel, dripping with the kind of confidence only arrogance can give. "What am I supposed to tell my clients?" he said, chuckling. "That I married a fat pig?" My body went rigid. Every syllable seared into me. My Anya, my bright, beautiful girl, had spent months starving herself for this man's approval. And this was what she got in return? In that instant, something inside me hardened. I wasn't sure if it was rage or heartbreak, maybe both. But I knew one thing. The day that was meant to begin her new life had just ended mine as a forgiving woman. The music from the reception drifted through the thin walls. Laughter, glasses clinking, a band playing some cheerful tune that suddenly sounded hollow. Everyone out there thought the day was perfect. They had no idea that, just a few steps away, I was standing in the ruins of my trust. I could still see Anya's smile in my mind, that wide, hopeful grin she'd worn since morning. She had hugged me before the ceremony, whispering, "Mama, he loves me so much." I almost believed her. I wanted to. Now, hearing his mockery, I felt something deeper than anger, grief. Not for myself, but for the part of my daughter that would soon crumble when she realized the man she adored had no kindness left in him. I pressed my hand to my chest, trying to steady the tremor beneath my ribs. Every mother knows the sound her child makes when she's happy, but it's the silence after cruelty that breaks you. In that silence, I made a quiet promise. He'd regret ever speaking her name with contempt. I wish I could tell you I stormed in and gave that man a piece of my mind. But I didn't. I stayed still listening, memorizing every cruel word that slipped from his mouth. Because fury without proof fades, but patience builds justice. Right there in that narrow hallway, something inside me changed. The woman who baked pies for every church picnic, who forgave neighbors for borrowing and never returning, she stepped aside. The woman who remained was colder, sharper, and she carried one purpose: to make sure Harrison Thorne learned what it means to wound a mother's child. People call it vengeance. I call it balance. Stay with me, because what I did next still echoes through our family's story. It's not just about revenge, it's about reclaiming respect when someone tries to steal it. If this kind of cruelty can happen in broad daylight, think about what happens when no one's watching. Subscribe now, don't wait to learn these lessons the hard way. And if you still won't, tell me in the comments why maybe you've never had your heart broken this way. Before that day turned sour, my daughter was the kind of woman who made ordinary moments shine. Anya had laughter that filled a room, and softened edges that drew people close. She taught kindergarten, a job that fit her heart like a glove. The children adored her because she treated every one of them like they were the most important soul in the world. At home, she baked on Sunday afternoons peach pies, cinnamon rolls, anything that made the house smell like comfort. Her hands were never idle. She either cooked, knitted, or planned another surprise for someone else's birthday. When neighbors fell ill, she showed up with soup before they could ask. She wasn't flashy, just steady and genuine. People said she looked like me when I was younger. Same round cheeks, same eyes, that gave away every feeling before her lips did. She had her grandfather's humor too, the kind that could turn a bad day into a story worth retelling. I always said she'd marry a man who understood her warmth, someone who'd never make her dim it to feel small. I was certain of that. So when she finally told me she'd met someone special, I didn't worry. I smiled and said, "Well, sweetheart, I hope he's worthy of all that sunshine." It was at our annual 4th of July barbecue when Anya brought him home for the first time. The yard was dressed in red and white, children ran barefoot through the grass, and the grill smoked like a summer promise. That's when I saw him, Harrison Thorne, tall, pressed, and far too polished for a town like Pine Ridge. He carried himself like a man who'd never lifted anything heavier than his own opinion. His handshake was firm, his smile precise. Every word that left his mouth sounded measured, like it had been practiced in front of a mirror. He worked in finance in Charlotte, a world away from our small-town rhythms. While the men joked about fishing and weather, Harrison talked about markets and mergers, words that didn't belong under our oak tree. Yet somehow, he made everyone listen. That was his gift. He could make you feel like you were the only one in the room, even while sizing you up. Anya floated around him like he was gravity itself. Her laughter came easier, her eyes sparkled brighter. I wanted to be happy for her, and I was at least on the surface. But when he called me Mama Elsie, that very first afternoon, before dessert was even served, something in me hesitated. He was too quick, too smooth. Still, I brushed it off. Love has a way of making mothers doubt their own instincts. That evening, when the guests had gone and the yard was quiet, I stood by the kitchen sink, watching Anya help him load the last of the dishes. Harrison was charming in all the ways that make a mother want to believe, attentive, polite, quick to compliment. He laughed at my stories about bootlegging days and said, "I see where Anya gets her fire." It was easy to like him in small doses, but there was a flash in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. Not anger, not cruelty exactly, just calculation. As if every smile had a purpose. Pine Ridge had seen men like that before. They come dressed in confidence, saying all the right things, but there's always a chill that lingers after they leave a room. I told myself it was just city polish, that he wasn't used to our kind of plain honesty. Still, something in my gut whispered, "Be careful." Anya brushed it off when I mentioned it later. "Mama," she said, "he's just nervous around family." I wanted to believe her. Love can make even the sharpest minds look away from what's plain to see. If only I'd listened to that whisper, instead of my heart that night. What would you have done if your gut told you something was wrong, but love told you to stay quiet? For a while, I almost believed Harrison was the kind of man my daughter had prayed for. He sent flowers that arrived before sunrise, each with a handwritten note that read like something out of a romance novel. When Anya got home from work, he'd already be there, stirring soup in my kitchen like he'd been part of the family all along. He remembered birthdays, brought gifts for the neighbors' children, and even helped old Mr. Denton fix a gate one Sunday afternoon. Folks in town started calling him a gentleman, and I'll admit, even I softened toward him for a while. Every Sunday dinner, he made sure to help with the dishes, always smiling, always present. "Mama Elsie," he'd say, "you've raised the finest woman I've ever met." The way he looked at Anya in those early days could have convinced anyone he was in love. But love, I've learned, doesn't always come wrapped in kindness. Sometimes it hides behind effort. He had the kind of smile that made you forget to check the math. Too easy, too perfect, too precise. I started noticing that he always chose the restaurant, always suggested her outfits, always made her feel like he was improving her in small, polite ways that seemed thoughtful on the surface. At the time, I didn't see control, I saw care. The first time I noticed something off, it was small, so small most people wouldn't have caught it. Anya mentioned joining a running group after work, just something to clear her mind. Harrison smiled and said, "Sweetheart, you don't really have the build for running. Maybe yoga would be better, gentler." He said it like a compliment, but it wasn't. She laughed, brushed it off, and changed the topic. I stayed quiet, but that moment clung to me like a burr. Then came the dinners. He always ordered for her, saying things like, "Trust me, you'll love this one." And if she ever disagreed, that polished smile appeared again, followed by, "Don't overthink it, love. I know what suits you." It was his way of shaping her choices, without ever raising his voice. To the outside world, he was attentive, the dream partner. To me, he was a craftsman, trimming her confidence, little by little, all while pretending to polish it. Still, Anya glowed whenever he walked into a room. She didn't see the strings he was gently tying around her wrists. There were moments I thought I might be wrong about him. He'd laugh at my jokes, fix the loose porch light, and brag about Anya's kindness to anyone who'd listen. That's how charm works, it blinds before it binds. Looking back, I realized that love isn't what blinds people hope does. I hoped Harrison was everything Anya believed him to be. I hoped his smooth words meant something real, but the truth has a way of showing itself in the smallest cracks. He was polite, never loud, never cruel outright. Yet, his compliments came with edges. "You look stunning in that dress, sweetheart," he'd say, "though I do prefer when you wear your hair up. It hides the roundness." Anya would giggle, say he was teasing, and I'd force a smile. But my stomach tightened every time, because love shouldn't sound like correction disguised as care. Even I fell under his spell for a short while. He'd sit on the porch, swing beside me, asking about my late husband, listening so intently that I almost forgot what I'd seen in his eyes, that flicker of quiet judgment. He made everyone believe he was the best thing that ever happened to her. And for a time, even I did too. But deep down, a mother knows. The air felt different when he was around, still and watchful, as if waiting for the moment he could prove he knew better than everyone else. Have you ever met someone who looked perfect on paper but felt wrong in your bones? It started one evening at my dinner table, nothing fancy, just a small family meal. Anya had been training for a charity run, glowing with pride. She looked healthy, strong, happy. I served my pot roast, the same recipe my mother taught me, and as she reached for a second roll, Harrison smiled that pleasant, polished smile of his and said, "Sweetheart, are you sure you want another? You'll have the seamstress begging for mercy if you keep that up." He chuckled, as though it was harmless. Anya's hand froze halfway to the plate. The room went quiet for a beat, then she laughed too quickly, too forced, and put the roll back. My heart twisted. He wasn't joking. He was measuring her, testing how far he could go. I told myself, maybe I'd misunderstood, but mothers don't mistake that kind of tone. I saw the way she shifted in her chair, suddenly aware of every bite she took. Later, while clearing the dishes, I whispered, "Baby, I don't let him talk to you like that." She smiled, tired but loyal. "Mama, he's just teasing. He worries about me. He wants me healthy." Healthy. That's the word women use when they don't want to admit they're shrinking themselves for someone else's comfort. That night, I couldn't sleep. The laughter from dinner kept replaying in my head, only this time, it sounded cruel. The next time it happened, it was in public. Anya had found a beautiful green gown for a benefit gala, elegant and modest, the kind that made her glow without even trying. When she stepped out of the dressing room, my breath caught. She looked stunning. Harrison glanced up from his phone, gave her a once-over, and said, "It's nice, honey, but maybe it draws too much attention to, your hips. Something with straighter lines might be better." He said it with a grin, that soft tone meant to sound helpful, but every word was a needle. Anya's shoulders fell. She nodded, went back into the dressing room, and returned wearing a plain black dress that swallowed her figure. "This one's fine," she said quietly. Fine. That word broke me more than anything. My girl had stopped wanting to shine. I tried again to reach her. "Sweetheart," I told her later, "he keeps saying these things that don't sound like love." But she only smiled, as if she needed to protect him. "Mama, he just wants me to look my best. He's particular, that's all." Particular. That was her defense, the word she used to cover the wounds she didn't want to see. I knew then that it wasn't teasing or taste, it was control. And control dressed up as care is still cruelty. There comes a moment when a mother knows the truth, even if her child can't say it out loud. For me, that moment arrived one Saturday afternoon at the house. Harrison was there, helping Anya plan their engagement party. She was laughing while decorating cupcakes, and he came up behind her, hands on her waist, whispering something that made her face tighten for a split second before she forced another laugh. That flicker, that tiny flash of embarrassment told me everything I needed to know. She was living inside his approval. Later that night, I found her sitting on the porch, quiet. "You okay, baby?" I asked. She nodded, eyes on the stars. "He just jokes too much sometimes, Mama. I'm being sensitive." That's what they make you believe, that your pain is an overreaction. That the problem isn't their cruelty, it's your weakness. I wanted to grab her and tell her to run, but she looked so sure, so in love with her own denial, so I bit my tongue. I told myself I'd wait, I'd watch, and when the moment came, I'd step in for good. But inside, I was already grieving, because I could see my daughter shrinking, one joke at a time, fading into the background of a love that demanded silence. Tell me in the comments, would you call this love or control? Harrison proposed in a way that made headlines on social media before I even got the phone call. He took Anya to Charleston for the weekend. A yacht, a private photographer, a table set for two under string lights. When she said yes, a drone captured the moment, complete with ocean waves and applause from strangers. The pictures were flawless. The smile on my daughter's face was too. But her eyes told a quieter story, tired, a little uncertain, like someone trying to match the happiness everyone expected her to feel. When she came home to tell me, she was glowing, waving her hand in the air so the diamond could catch the light. I hugged her, of course I did, but something inside me hesitated. Harrison had called me right after the proposal. "Mama Elsie," he said, his voice slick with charm, "your daughter deserves the world, and I plan to give it to her." But I'd learned to listen to how people speak, not just what they say. His tone wasn't warm, it was triumphant, like a man who'd closed a deal. I told him congratulations, but when I hung up, I sat there staring at the wall, uneasy. Love shouldn't sound like a business victory. The moment the engagement excitement settled, Harrison took charge of everything. Anya had dreamed of a simple country wedding, wildflowers, peach cobbler, the family farm strung with lights and laughter. But Harrison had a different vision. He said a wedding like that wouldn't photograph well. Suddenly, it was all about aesthetics, optics, and status. The venue changed from our backyard to a gallery in Charlotte. The caterer Anya loved was replaced with someone modern, and the guest list, oh, that list became his obsession. He crossed out names she'd grown up with and added people from his office. Anya tried to reason with him. "Harrison, it's my wedding too," she said one night while I was visiting. He smiled, kissed her forehead, and replied, "Of course it is, darling. I just want everything to look perfect for both of us." But perfect always meant his way. I watched as her excitement drained little by little. The woman who used to hum while she baked now checked menus and flower budgets with trembling hands. He'd made her believe that her opinions were distractions, her tastes too simple. When I spoke up, Anya defended him again. "He's just particular, Mama," she said, smiling weakly. "He wants us to have the best." That word again, particular. It was starting to sound more like possession. There were nights I sat on the porch, staring at the engagement photo she'd sent me. Anya in that white dress, Harrison's arm wrapped around her waist, his smile tight and victorious. She looked happy, but her posture told a different truth. It was the smile of someone holding her breath. I wanted to believe she'd come to her senses on her own, but every time we spoke, she sounded more like him, measured, cautious, apologetic. She used to dream out loud. Now, she second-guessed every word before speaking. One evening, I found her in the kitchen, rewriting a seating chart because Harrison didn't like where his parents were placed. Her eyes were red from crying. I asked, "Baby, do you even like this man anymore?" She hesitated. "Of course, Mama. He just wants everything to go right." I bit my tongue. I'd been raised to stay polite, to keep the peace, but in that moment, I felt a storm brewing in my chest. I could already see where this road would lead, and I hated myself for not stopping it. Love wasn't guiding this marriage anymore. Control was steering it. Some people propose out of love, others propose out of ownership. Which one do you think Harrison was? The day Anya found her wedding dress should have been perfect. We drove to a boutique in Charlotte, the kind with gold mirrors and soft music that makes every woman feel like she's stepping into a dream. Anya tried on 3 gowns before she found the one, a soft, satin A-line with lace sleeves that shimmered under the lights. When she stepped out from behind the curtain, the room went quiet. My breath caught. She looked radiant, like every hope I'd ever had for her had taken shape right there in front of me. Even the seamstress, Clementine, smiled and said, "Honey, that dress was made for you." I was about to cry when Harrison finally looked up from his phone. He didn't smile. He didn't stand. He just studied her, slow and critical, like he was reviewing a report instead of looking at the woman he was about to marry. "It's nice," he said finally. "Traditional." Then he leaned back and sighed. But we agreed on something more streamlined. The satin adds, "Volume. It's not the most flattering cut for your figure, is it?" Clementine's hands froze on the fabric. The room fell silent. Anya's face drained of color. I could feel heat rising in my chest, not embarrassment, but fury. I don't remember standing. One minute I was sitting on that couch, and the next, I was on my feet, my voice cutting through that suffocating quiet. "Flattering?" I said, my tone sharper than I'd planned. Boy, she looks beautiful. You don't need to flatter perfection. Harrison blinked, startled by my sudden boldness. His smile came back slow, controlled. Mrs. Mae, I didn't mean anything by it, just giving an opinion. Then maybe keep it to yourself if your opinions ruin moments like this. Anya's eyes darted between us, torn. I could see her silently pleading with me not to make it worse. So I took a breath and sat down, but the damage was already done. The joy in the room had vanished. The seamstress cleared her throat and excused herself to the back, giving us space that none of us really wanted. Anya turned to Harrison, voice trembling. You embarrassed me. He smiled that same calm, poisonous smile. I was helping you. You asked what I thought. Helping, that's what he called it. Every criticism, every jab help. On the drive home, Anya barely spoke. I kept glancing at her hands, clenched in her lap, the diamond flashing with every turn of the wheel. That sparkle felt cruel now, like it was mocking her. By the time we reached the house, she whispered, maybe I should change the dress. And just like that, he'd won again. Over the next few weeks, the glow in Anya's face began to fade. She started skipping family dinners, claiming she was too busy with wedding prep. When I did see her, her clothes hung looser. She pushed food around her plate, laughing it off when I asked if she was dieting. Harrison thinks I'll feel better in the photos if I slim down a little, she said. He's probably right. Every bride wants to look perfect. Perfect. That word again. It didn't sound like joy anymore, it sounded like a cage. I tried to remind her that beauty isn't measured by the size of a waistline, but she just smiled faintly, eyes distant. Mama, I'm fine. He just wants me to be confident. But I could see it, the way she flinched at her own reflection, the way she checked her phone constantly, waiting for his approval before making the smallest choice. One night, I found her crying quietly in her old bedroom. The wedding dress hung from the closet door, not the lace gown she loved, but a thinner, simpler one. He said the other dress made me look heavier, she whispered. I wanted to take that man by the collar and show him what real cruelty looks like, but all I could do was hold her while she tried to hide her tears. That night, something inside me hardened. I knew love shouldn't feel like starvation, not of food, not of spirit. Would you have stayed silent, or stepped in like I did? The morning of the wedding was bright, too bright, the kind of day that looked perfect in pictures, but felt hollow underneath. The gallery in Charlotte shimmered with white lilies and glass chandeliers. Everything was staged, timed, and rehearsed to perfection. Harrison wouldn't have it any other way. Anya stood before the mirror in her new dress, pale and trembling. She looked beautiful, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. I stood behind her, adjusting her veil, pretending my hands weren't shaking. Are you happy, baby? I asked softly. She nodded without looking at me. Of course, Mama. I'm just nervous. But her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. Guests started arriving, Harrison's co-workers in their tailored suits, his parents whispering in judgmental tones. Every move Anya made seemed to be monitored, corrected, or approved by someone else. When Harrison walked in, the room changed. He greeted people with his signature charm, hugging Anya for the cameras, whispering something that made her laugh, but her laugh sounded practiced. The photographer caught it all, of course. He always made sure the world saw the version of him he wanted them to see. I sat in the front row during the ceremony, hands clasped tight, heart pounding against my ribs. I should have been crying tears of joy, but all I felt was dread. I told myself to be still, to smile, to not ruin her day. But something inside me whispered, "You're watching your daughter walk into a cage, and you're holding the door open for her." The reception was a performance from start to finish. The music played, champagne flowed, and every laugh sounded just a little too loud. Harrison held Anya close, leading her in a slow dance that looked tender but felt staged, the kind of intimacy that exists only for an audience. I sat with relatives from Pine Ridge, all of them beaming, whispering about how lucky Anya was to marry such a fine man. Every time they said it, my stomach turned. When Anya came to greet me, I saw the faint tremor in her hands. "Mama," she whispered, "everything's perfect, isn't it?" Her question wasn't for reassurance, it was a plea. A daughter asking her mother to agree with a lie she wasn't strong enough to escape yet. "Yes, baby," I said, forcing a smile. Everything's beautiful. But the truth pressed against my chest like a weight. Harrison's charm filled the room like perfume too strong, too sweet, and impossible to breathe around. He moved through the crowd with that politician's smile, hand on Anya's back, as if she were part of his suit, something he owned, something he wore to impress. At one point, I caught him glancing at her plate during dinner. She hadn't touched her food. He leaned close, whispered something in her ear, and she pushed it aside. That's when I knew. This wasn't a celebration. It was a performance of control, and everyone was clapping for it. After the cake was cut, and the guests began drifting toward the dance floor, I slipped away to catch my breath. The noise and laughter were too much. I stepped into the hallway near the coat room, a quiet corner lined with mirrors and dim light. That's when I heard them. Harrison's voice smooth, low, careless. He was talking to one of his groomsmen, both of them laughing under their breath. "She really thinks she looked good today," Harrison said, his tone dripping with contempt. "That dress barely fit. She's been eating like a pig for months. Fat pig on her wedding day." The words didn't echo, they carved. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled, my heart beating so loud I thought they'd hear it. I pressed my palm against the wall to steady myself, but it didn't stop the shaking. I wanted to scream, to march in there and slap the smug off his face, but something stronger than anger took hold, a cold, still kind of fury. I turned away quietly. I walked back toward the ballroom and smiled at the first person I saw. No one could know what I'd just heard, not yet. Because right then, in that small, suffocating hallway, I made a promise. He would regret those words. Not with noise, not with chaos, with silence. When I returned to the ballroom, the world looked different. The same lights still glowed, the same music played, but I could barely hear it. I saw Anya across the room, her arms around that man, her face resting against his chest, smiling for the camera that would freeze her happiness forever. My throat burned, not from tears, but from holding back every truth I wanted to scream. I sat there and watched him dance with her, his hand pressing against her waist, the same hand that had pointed and laughed just minutes ago. He kissed her forehead as the crowd cheered. The world saw devotion. I saw cruelty wearing a tuxedo. That's when the promise formed, quiet, deliberate, absolute. I would not confront him that night. That would have given him power. No, I'd let him believe he'd won. Because men like Harrison never see the storm until it's too late. And I was the storm. Imagine hearing those words about your daughter. What would your next move be? If you think it could never happen in your family, you're wrong. Subscribe now, so you'll never ignore the warning signs I missed. And if you won't, comment why. Maybe you trust people more than I did, and that's how heartbreak starts. When the house finally went quiet that night, I sat alone in the dark. The wedding gift sat stacked in the corner, ribbons and wrapping paper scattered like the aftermath of a storm. I should have been asleep, but my mind wouldn't rest. Those words, fat pig, echoed again and again, slicing through the silence like glass. I thought about every warning sign I'd ignored. The jokes, the controlling tone, the little humiliations brushed off as love. I'd seen it all, but I'd stayed quiet because I didn't want to ruin her happiness. That silence was my mistake. The clock ticked past midnight, steady and unfeeling. I went to the mirror, looked at myself, eyes swollen, hands shaking, but something in my reflection looked different. The softness was gone. The fear too. I whispered it out loud. This needed planning, not passion. And in that whisper, I found clarity. I wouldn't confront him in anger. Anger burns out fast. But quiet planning, that's what destroys from the inside out. I turned off the light, sat by the window, and watched the sky begin to gray with dawn. By the time the sun rose, my decision was made. I wasn't just Anya's mother anymore. I was her shield, and Harrison just didn't know it yet. In the days that followed, I moved through the house like a ghost. Every corner carried a memory: the hallway where Anya used to twirl in her prom dress, the kitchen, where she learned to bake biscuits, laughing at her own mistakes. But now, the laughter was gone, replaced by the dull hum of my thoughts. I started lighting the old oil lamp in the evenings. Its glow flickered across the window glass, painting my reflection in amber and shadow. I'd stare at that reflection and whisper to it like a prayer. "You've been quiet long enough. That lamp became my companion, steady, silent, burning slow. Its flame reminded me that destruction and warmth come from the same fire. It only depends on where you aim it. Each night, I wrote notes in a small ledger. Names, dates, observations. I began collecting details about Harrison, the people he called, the hours he kept, the way he spoke when he thought no one was listening. Not because I wanted to destroy him yet, but because I wanted to understand the kind of man who could humiliate love in front of the world. And the more I learned, the calmer I became. That's how I knew I was changing. The anger wasn't loud anymore. It was precise, focused. By the 5th night, I stopped flinching when I heard his name. I no longer saw a man, I saw a mission. By the end of that week, the fear was gone. What replaced it wasn't hatred, it was purpose. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, not out of habit, but to think. Every sweep of the broom, every folded towel, was a step closer to clarity. Planning feels easier when your hands are busy. That's what I told myself. At night, I'd sit by the same mirror where I'd once seen a broken mother. Now I saw someone else, a woman who understood that silence could be sharper than any blade. Revenge didn't feel like rage anymore. It felt like balance. Justice, wrapped in patience. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to beg anyone to see what I saw. Time would reveal the truth, but only if I guided it. Anya thought I was moving on. Harrison thought I'd accepted him. Good. Let them think that. Let them both believe I'd gone quiet again. Because sometimes, the quietest moments are the ones before everything changes. If you'd want to see how this ends, subscribe, because silence can be the deadliest weapon. You can't fight a snake unless you know where it hides. That was the first thought that came to me, as I started what I later called my quiet investigation. I didn't tell a soul, not even Anya. She was too deep inside her own denial to see what was happening. Harrison had her wrapped in silken ropes of love and concern, each one disguised as care. So, I started small. I began keeping notes, times, dates, who he called, who he avoided, what hours his car wasn't in their driveway. He liked to boast about work trips, but I noticed his lies didn't always line up with his social media posts. Late one night, after another sleepless hour of scrolling, I picked up the phone and called my son, Elias. He was my late husband's boy from his first marriage, quiet, loyal, and smart with computers in ways I'd never fully understood. Eli, I said, I need you to look into someone for me. He didn't ask why. He just sighed, already knowing from my tone that this wasn't about curiosity. Within a week, he sent me the first batch of information, not much at first, but enough to show me the cracks, bank withdrawals that didn't match his paycheck. A credit card used in Charleston when he claimed to be in Atlanta. A pattern was forming, and I was patient enough to let it reveal itself. That was the beginning of my war room, a simple kitchen table covered with notes, receipts, and photographs. Every weapon needs a workspace. Once I had the first pieces of evidence, I shifted my focus from finding his weaknesses to protecting hers. Anya still believed Harrison was her safety net, but I knew better men like him use money as a leash. So, I started cutting the cords before he realized they were gone. I met with our family lawyer under the pretense of updating my will. What I actually did was move my savings into a trust that bore Anya's name, separate from any joint account she shared with her husband. If he tried to control her through finances, I'd already built her an escape hatch. While I worked on that, I paid a quiet visit to the one person who'd seen his cruelty up close, Clementine, the seamstress from the boutique. She remembered the day like it was yesterday. That man's words sucked the air out of the room, she said. I'll never forget how small that girl looked afterward. I asked her if she'd be willing to write down what she saw. Nothing dramatic, just the truth. She didn't hesitate. No one should talk to a woman like that, she said, her voice steady. A few days later, she handed me an affidavit signed, dated, and notarized. I didn't tell Anya about it. She wasn't ready to face that truth yet. At night, I spread everything across the kitchen table. Elias's findings, bank statements, Clementine's document. My war room was taking shape not out of rage, but out of love so fierce it demanded order. Revenge isn't about rage, it's about timing. Every plan needs patience, and I had more of it than Harrison could ever imagine. Elias kept feeding me information, encrypted emails, call logs, photos that didn't match his alibis. "He's talking to someone named Melissa," Elias said one night. Several late-night transfers to her account. That was the first real crack in Harrison's perfect mask. While Elias handled the digital side, I began to work on the human one. I started visiting a few of Harrison's colleagues, under the guise of being the proud mother-in-law. Most were polite but uncomfortable, the kind of discomfort that hides guilt. One of them, a young intern, accidentally mentioned that Harrison had taken business trips with Melissa more than once. That was enough confirmation for me. Piece by piece, I built the puzzle. Photos, bank statements, affidavits, patterns of behavior. I wasn't rushing, I was preparing. Every detail I gathered was another layer of armor around Anya protection she didn't even know she had. At times, I'd catch myself smiling while brewing coffee, not out of joy, but out of certainty. He thought I was just an aging woman in a floral apron. He didn't realize I was assembling a story strong enough to burn his reputation to the ground, using his own words and choices as the kindling. By the time Elias sent me the final batch of files, I wasn't shaking anymore. I was steady, a calm sea before the storm. With the pieces assembled, I drafted what I called the blueprint, the sequence that would pull his reputation apart without ever looking like a tantrum from a disgruntled mother. There's an art to timing. Reveal too soon, and it looks like spite. Reveal too late, and evidence can disappear. So we set the calendar and waited. First, Elias organized the documents into a clear timeline. Hotel charges that contradicted his statements, transfers to accounts whose recipients didn't exist on any company roster, and messages that showed a pattern of deceit. I labeled each page, stapled exhibits together, and wrote short summaries in my ledger so anyone who read it would see the truth without needing to guess. Next, I prepared the financial safeguard for Anya, the separate accounts, the trust, the paperwork that made sure she had options the moment she wanted them. I met quietly with a lawyer who understood discretion. He told me, "Miss May, you've got iron in your spine." I smiled and said nothing. Actions would speak louder than compliments. Then came the human side, arranging for Clementine's signed statement to land where it would matter, gently nudging a few of Harrison's associates to confirm details in private, and making sure the media angle, if needed, would present facts, not emotion. We weren't out for public spectacle. We were after accountability. I wanted proof that would not be dismissed as bitterness. I kept my face calm through all of it. I carried on making pies and attending to neighborly chores. To Harrison and his circle, I was still Mama Elsie, harmless, smiling, the grandmother who knitted at the bridge club. That was the point. We've all seen men like Harrison polish devils hiding behind smiles, but not every mama fights back, would you? After weeks of gathering proof, I started acting softer. That's the trick most people never expect when you're ready to strike. Don't grow sharper, grow sweeter. Harrison came around more often, all smiles and polite charm. He'd sit at my kitchen table, sipping coffee, talking about business while pretending to care how I was doing. I'd nod, laugh at his stories, and keep his cup full. Inside, I was memorizing every detail: the watch he checked every 10 minutes, the way his fingers tapped when he lied, the arrogance in his tone when he spoke about managing my daughter. I asked harmless questions, the kind that sound like small talk but build an invisible map. "So, you're still traveling a lot for work. Doesn't that get lonely, all those hotel nights?" He smiled, smug. "It's part of leadership, Mama Elsie. Some people aren't built for that kind of pressure." He thought I admired him. I didn't. I was collecting his tells, every gesture, every half-truth, every word that would hang him later. That night, after he left, I sat by the same lamp I'd lit during my darkest nights and whispered to myself, "He thinks I've given up." That lie, that illusion, was my greatest weapon. The next time Harrison smiled at me, it wouldn't be out of victory. It would be the last smile he'd ever give as a free man. I've learned that true power doesn't shout, it whispers. Every move I made had to look like love. I started by encouraging Anya to open a small account in her own name, calling it a rainy day fund. She laughed at first, saying she didn't need one. Harrison handled everything. I smiled and said, "It's just in case, baby. Life's easier when you've got your own umbrella." She didn't argue with me after that. By the end of the week, Her name was on a quiet account that Harrison didn't know existed, one I quietly fed with deposits from the trust I'd created. Then came the digital groundwork. Elias and I worked late into the night, creating backups of everything: screenshots, files, bank statements. We stored them in multiple places, making sure that even if one source vanished, another would rise in its place. I visited Harrison's mother under the pretense of getting to know the in-laws better. Over tea, I listened as she complained about how her son had always been too ambitious for his own good. That one line told me everything. Greed had always been his weakness. By the time I left that house, I knew exactly how to corner him. All that was left was patience, the kind of patience that makes the cruelest trap look like a coincidence. And through it all, I kept smiling, baking pies, attending church, asking about Anya's future home decor, as if I didn't already know how fragile her husband's empire really was. The storm was ready. He just hadn't noticed the sky yet. By the time summer gave way to autumn, everything was in place. Elias's data trail was airtight, Clementine's affidavit was filed away safely, and Anya's financial lifeline was tucked beneath layers of quiet security. Harrison still thought I was the sweet mother-in-law who adored him, and that was the biggest part of the trap. He came by one Sunday afternoon, all smiles and arrogance, talking about an upcoming promotion. "Big things coming, Mama Elsie," he said. "Anya and I will be moving up soon." I smiled, slicing pie and nodding as if I believed him. Every word he spoke added another thread to his own undoing. As he ate, I noticed how easily he carried his deceit, no guilt, no hesitation. It confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't just vanity, it was entitlement. He thought the world owed him admiration, no matter who he crushed beneath his shoes. When he left, I stood at the window watching him walk to his car. His reflection caught in the glass for a brief moment, confident, untouchable. I whispered to myself, "Enjoy it while you can." Because soon, that reflection would shatter. The plan was no longer theory, it was motion. Each lie he'd told had become a step toward his own ruin. And I wasn't praying for divine justice anymore. I was preparing to deliver it myself quietly, efficiently, and without regret. Some people ignore stories like this until it's their daughter living the same nightmare. Don't make that mistake. Subscribe now. And if you still won't, drop a comment, tell me what it would take for you to believe that monsters really wear suits. The day it began, the air felt still, too still. Elias had scheduled the release for a Monday morning. No fireworks, no warning, just a quiet flood of truth delivered straight to the inboxes of the right people: his company board, a few journalists, and one local news outlet that loved a good scandal. By noon, the first calls started. By 2 o'clock, the company's PR team was already scrambling. Bank statements, offshore transfers, fake invoices, everything laid out in neat, undeniable order. Harrison's name printed on every document like a confession. I didn't have to see his face to know how he reacted. Men like him don't crumble gracefully. They flail. They make phone calls, issue denials, throw others under the bus, all while pretending to stay composed. By evening, one of the local channels broke the story. Charlotte financial consultant, under investigation for fraud and misappropriation. There it was, his empire, cracking under the same arrogance that built it. Anya saw the headline before I could prepare her. She came to my house, trembling, holding her phone. "Mama, is this true?" I looked her in the eye. "It's true, baby. Every bit of it." She sank into a chair, silent. No tears, no shock, just a deep, tired exhale. "He said he was doing it for us," she whispered. I touched her hand gently, then let him face the world he tried to control. By the next morning, the story was everywhere. News anchors spoke his name with that sharp mix of fascination and disgust. His photo, the same smug smile he used in company ads, flashed across screens beside words like fraud, investigation, suspension. Harrison's world ran on perception, and perception was turning against him faster than he could spin it. Reporters camped outside his office, asking questions he couldn't answer. Former clients demanded refunds. His partners pretended not to know him. One by one, his friends disappeared, as though he carried a contagion no one wanted to catch. Anya stayed at my house during those days. She didn't eat much. She didn't talk much either. She was processing, peeling back years of manipulation, and finally seeing the truth without the makeup. Meanwhile, Harrison tried to control the narrative. He sent press releases, hired lawyers, even called Anya begging her to stand by him publicly. She listened once, quietly, then said, "You called me a fat pig on our wedding day. I'm done standing anywhere near you." That was the moment I saw her reclaim herself. The fear that had once clouded her eyes was gone. When the federal agents finally showed up at his office, cameras caught it all, him walking out in a suit, hands cuffed, face pale, the same crowd that once cheered him now whispering. The internet ate it up. But I didn't gloat. I just poured myself a cup of tea, sat on the porch, and whispered, "Justice doesn't always knock loud sometimes, it just walks right in." When the chaos died down, the silence that followed felt heavier than the headlines. Anya sat by the window for hours that week, watching the world move on while hers stood still. The house smelled of coffee and lavender candles, small comforts that couldn't reach her grief. I wanted to tell her that she was free, that she'd been saved, but freedom after captivity doesn't come easy. It arrives in pieces, confusion, anger, exhaustion, then, finally, peace. One night, she turned to me and said, "Mama, you knew, didn't you?" I didn't lie. "Yes, baby, I knew." She didn't cry. She just nodded slowly, as if confirming something she'd always suspected. After a long pause, she whispered, "Thank you, but how did you do it?" I looked at her, my child, no longer a victim, but a woman finding her footing again. "The same way mothers have always done," I said softly, quietly, carefully, "for love." Her shoulders shook, not from tears, but release. She reached over and took my hand. For the first time in months, she smiled, not for a camera, not for anyone's approval, but for herself. That smile was my reward. Not the headlines, not his downfall, but that single moment where she remembered who she was before he tried to erase her. The house felt lighter after that, as if the air itself was exhaling. Harrison Thorne's name faded from the news after a few weeks, replaced by newer scandals and louder tragedies. But for those of us who'd lived under his shadow, the silence he left behind was the sweetest sound. Anya found a new rhythm. She started volunteering at a local shelter, baking on weekends, even laughing again, the kind of laugh that came from her belly, not from politeness. Every now and then, she'd catch herself apologizing for small things, and then stop, mid-sentence, realizing she didn't need permission to exist anymore. As for me, I didn't celebrate. Revenge isn't a toast, it's a reckoning. It leaves you calmer, not happier, but calmer is enough. One evening, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, watching fireflies rise from the grass. The world looked soft again, peaceful. I thought about that wedding day, about the words that once burned holes through my heart. They didn't hurt anymore. They'd served their purpose to awaken the part of me that refused to watch another generation of women shrink in silence. If karma had a face, it wouldn't wear fury, it would wear patience. If karma had a voice, it wouldn't shout. It would whisper, steady and southern, reminding the wicked that kindness has a breaking point. If karma had a southern accent, it'd sound a lot like Grandma Elsie Mae. There's something no one tells you about justice, it's heavy. It doesn't glide in like a blessing, it settles like dust after a long storm. You breathe it in, you live with it, and eventually, it becomes part of your air. After Harrison's downfall, people kept asking me if I felt proud. I never knew how to answer that. Pride wasn't the word. What I felt was relief, a deep, quiet exhale that came after months of holding my breath. Some nights I'd sit up late, staring at the same mirror where this all began. I'd trace the lines on my face, every one of them earned through worry, love, and the kind of pain that turns into wisdom. I didn't see anger anymore. I saw endurance. Anya once asked if I regretted it. I told her the truth, not a single bit. Because I wasn't driven by vengeance, I was driven by duty. A mother's job isn't to teach her children that the world is fair. It's to show them how to survive when it isn't. Revenge can be cruel, yes, but in the right hands, it can also be mercy. Mercy for those too gentle to fight back, and a warning for those who mistake kindness for weakness. Justice doesn't always need applause. Sometimes, it just needs peace. In the months that followed, People in town started treating me differently. Some called me brave, others whispered that I'd gone too far. I didn't argue with either group because both were a little bit right. You can't walk through fire and come out untouched. I lost parts of myself along the way. The softness that used to overlook bad behavior. The patience that once made excuses for cruelty. But what I gained was sharper, stronger, truer. I learned that love isn't supposed to silence you. Real love gives you a voice, and when someone tries to take that away, you fight to get it back. I also learned that protecting your loved ones is not just instinct, it's sacred work. The kind of work that doesn't get celebrated, because it often happens quietly, in late-night decisions, in held tongues, in small acts of courage no one ever sees. I used to believe forgiveness was the highest form of grace. Now I understand that boundaries are holy too. Sometimes grace looks like distance. Sometimes, love looks like justice served cold. If Anya ever has a daughter of her own, I hope she tells her this story not to glorify revenge, but to remind her that her worth isn't measured by how much pain she can endure for someone else's comfort. Because when women forget their worth, the world grows crueler. The world eventually went quiet again. The scandal faded, the neighbors stopped whispering, and life returned to its small, steady rhythm. That's how you know healing has begun, when ordinary moments start to feel safe again. Most evenings, I sit out on my porch with a cup of chamomile tea. The air hums with crickets, and the sky glows soft over Pine Ridge. Fireflies blink across the yard, tiny lanterns floating through the dark like little souls refusing to stay dimmed. I think about my husband sometimes, about how proud he'd be of our children, about how he used to say, "Elsie, storms don't last forever, they just make the soil stronger." He was right. The storm passed, and what it left behind wasn't ruin, it was renewal. Anya comes by often now. She helps in the garden, brings me peach pie, tells me about her new job, and the people who treat her with kindness. There's a light in her again, the same one I thought Harrison had taken. Sometimes, she catches me smiling and asks why. I tell her, "Because I can finally breathe easy, baby. You're free, and that's all I ever wanted." The fire inside me hasn't gone out. It's just gentler now, no longer a weapon, but a reminder of what love can survive. And in that quiet, surrounded by fireflies and freedom, I know I did right by her. As I grow older, I've come to understand that every woman carries her own kind of fire. Some burn to keep others warm, and some burn to warn the world they won't be broken again. What I did wasn't about hatred. It was about setting the balance right, about reminding the cruel that love, when pushed too far, can become the very thing they fear most, unstoppable. I don't regret a single step I took, not the silence, not the planning, not the moment the truth finally found its voice. Because when monsters wear charm instead of claws, good women have to become something sharper. Now, when I hear stories of women being disrespected, controlled, or dismissed, I don't just feel pity, I feel kinship, because I know what it takes to stand up and say, "Not this time." Maybe that's what revenge really is, love that refused to die quietly. If anyone asks me what I'd do differently, I'd say nothing. Because if protecting my daughter makes me ruthless, then so be it. I can live with that. The night breeze moves through the porch, soft and forgiving. The fireflies rise again, painting light across the yard. I close my eyes and whisper, "It's over." Then I smile, not because I won, but because we're both finally free. Would you have done the same if it were your daughter? Tell me in the comments, and subscribe for more true grandma revenge stories.